Yes.
All right, get started. Tonight's review board meeting, we have two projects we'll be discussing. First one is a continuation of the West Shore Solar Project, which we, I'm not sure what date that was, it's a while back. And there was just one comment there that we had at the time, was we wanted just a little bit more fleshing out of the landscape buffer planting, which was supplied to us with let's see, Glauca, we have Placata, and Strobus, which sound like decent evergreen tree substitutions to catch up with there. So,
I really don't have that much to add, except if you recall, the areas of concern for buffers are in every direction.
Yep.
So that if you bring that up, and we have our landscape architect here, but the biggest concern from a roadway point of view is West Shore Road. West Shore Road is located, I think you can see the arrow, and West Shore Road drops off a little bit. So unlike some other projects may have done, now look at vegetated buffer of the topography of the land, the road sits about 4 or 5 feet higher. I'll show you the actual pictures and the renditions. But we're leaving the existing vegetation that grew up kind of along the parking lot edges. It was a much prettier picture for you a month ago than it is today with the leaves dropped, and it was reasoned by the evergreen planting behind it. But most importantly, it's going on a berm, so bringing the berm up to the road height, so the plantings start and are handicapped by a 3-foot drop. So when you plant a 5-foot arborvitae or leafland or whatever you put in, it doesn't take 3 or 4 years before you see an 8.5 to 10-foot panel. Then if you look at the area, I should bring but the area where the road is, Mike, if you take that arrow just a little bit north, right there, or a little bit south, where the road is, you know that we wrap the trees around the road so that not only you won't see or designed to block the panels while driving down the road, but you won't be able to see behind them on those corners. So that the entire neighbor across the street on the West Shore side, my farm, so they had to get behind me as well as anybody else. And one other farmhouse is there owned by clearing. But basically, we're doing, other than everybody who uses West Shore Road, the affected neighbors. Her house is much closer to the road, and that's why there's such a heavy landscape buffer right across from her house. I'm an affected neighbor, but in all fairness, my house is about 700 feet off the road, and there's a farm in between us. Notice we wrap around on both corners, so again, the goal is that driving down the road, you won't see it from looking straight over out your window, but also as you approach, you won't see behind it. If you recall, also, we then go down to Carnegie Heights, which is the south corner. See where the arrow is down where you see that orange berm that's drawn. So Carnegie Heights, if anyone's familiar with the neighborhood down there, when they put in those houses, there was a very large factory out in yachts, formerly the Pearson building. And from that road, that 35-foot factory, which took up almost 5 acres, you can see the pad that's drawn up on that solar field. That was an eyesore from down below. So at the time when Peter Sager, who developed it, he put about a 10 to 15-foot berm and retaining walls on his property on the Carnegie Heights side. And he brought in literally 30-foot mature trees and put them across. Some of them are broken in the wind. So if we were to put a landscape buffer on our property, on our side of the fence, we would start 10 feet below the top of that berm, which was on their property. So I met with Mike Barone, chairman of Carnegie Heights, and the owners of the couldn't have brought that. I don't think he came here, but he did show at the planning board, testify that he was in full support of what we were doing. We had landscape architects go to the top of that berm and develop a plan to augment all of the trees that were there. That was done. They were put in last Monday. It was at our expense. We wrote the check for it, and they are extremely happy with what we've done. That's in the orange area on their property. The other area where you see green trees, again, those are to protect those corners from anybody kind of looking around their berm. And we have our architect here to tell you what we proposed there. There's also topography as it goes up the hill when you slant from that berm over towards the main driveway. And that's why some of those trees might be down. Those trees there and the one in the corner, that's designed to stop anybody from Carnegie Heights looking up the hill from seeing panels. So we actually, rather than put those trees on the border, came up the hill at the elevation to block them there. So the whole goal in all other directions, the natural vegetation stays in place. Towards the water, it's 550 some feet of very thick vegetation. Because of the topography of the land that comes up from the water and then hits that west side of that pad where it was 100 years ago or whatever it was, cut flat. You can't see that because it doesn't. It's not cascading up the hill. It's coming in and it's cut where the pad is. And then all on the north side, which is the residence and areas known as Baker Road, again we maintain a farm there and heavy vegetation or fields, but it's the thinnest point I think is over 250 feet, and in most cases 450 to 500 feet again. Too many panels because of the cuts in the topography. If you can't see the pad now from there, you can't in any direction, you won't be able to see the 12-foot structures. So people have said this is a good spot for it, mainly because of cut level and cut low allows, but frankly, landscape architects to hide it much better than they can when they're dealing with a lot of other natural entities. Go down the distance. So just quickly, sure. Introduce yourself.
Sure. Yes, Kevin Alverson, registered landscape architects, office based in Whitford, Rhode Island. So I think Court gave a pretty great synopsis of the methodology of the landscape buffering. As he had mentioned, the majority of the focus is at any of the interfaces with some of the residences, and in particular along West Shore Road. So on the second sheet of that, there is a couple of details there. Down towards the bottom, that detail, I think it's 6, the cross section here. Scroll up a little bit. Right? Sorry, the other way. I guess it's being hidden by the screen sharing thing, but you can kind of see the that cross section here. That's explaining what Mr. Chappelle was mentioning along West Shore Road. On the far right-hand side of that detail, that's approximately the edge of the pavement, that dashed line that's vertical there. There's about 10 to 15 feet of shoulder on the road there, but the slope starts to slope down towards the property. Then we're maintaining, there's a band of, it's a pretty dense band of kind of pioneer species that you would see along the edges of a previously cleared site like this. So a lot of birch, but also some cedar, saplings, oaks, and maples. As mentioned before, certainly when the leaf drop is there, there's less buffering. So what we planned on doing was providing that 18 to 36 inch high berm on the back side of that existing vegetative buffer remain, which would be planted with a mixture of evergreen and deciduous shrubs and trees along that entire interface with West Shore Road. And then the fence line would be in the site of that. That's what's shown as that sort of gray solid line on the far left-hand side of that detail. The detail that's above it as well, as mentioned before, along the north edge of the site, there's a good amount of dense vegetation that's along there. There are a couple areas where we felt it would be appropriate. You can see some supplemental plantings that are in there. Just to be able to supplement along that north edge where it's a little bit more, I guess a little thinner vegetation. That detail that's provided on the secondary sheet is intended to, as a supplemental detail, a supplemental buffer, excuse me, if additional planting is necessary following that installation. But we don't feel it will be necessary, but we do have a trigger and a method in the projects as specified currently to be able to do that supplemental buffer if necessary. That could also occur along the south edge of the site. But again, there's probably 400 feet of vegetation along that area, so we don't feel it will be necessary, but we do have a method for it to be able to do it. There were a couple of exhibits that were put together for renderings as well. And these were those areas along West Shore Road. We want to be able to get a vehicle perspective driving north and south. Those, yeah, EX1 and EX2. So this is driving northbound along West Shore Road. The top image there is the current vegetation that I was mentioning earlier. You can see the saplings, pretty dense saplings of birch that's in there. There's also the cedar that's within there. There is some autumn olive and things in there that we would like to be able to remove, but we'd like to get the buffer established on the back side of that existing vegetation before that occurs. You can see the image on the bottom there. That's essentially the additional buffering that's placed. So again, from a perspective looking up, northbound along West Shore Road. The exhibit 2 is a similar. It's from the abutting residents from the north. They would be driving southbound along West Shore Road. That's the current condition that's along there. This is about where the entranceway, where the entranceway will be maintained and will be accessing the site. So that's a good perspective from that standpoint. You can see the additional vegetation that's being placed in the front.
And that is the existing entranceway. It's always been used for piercing. The only difference in some cases is there's a whole bunch of pavement. The pads themselves, which are the buildings, will stay. Because it's brownfield and they're 18 inches thick and some concerns on burying them. But the pavement that's on driveways and the hard packed gravel that is all parking areas, that all has to be turned in or removed with topsoil and seeds, grass seeds designed for the area with low growth.
Correct.
And low or no chemical.
Yes, where the pavement is being removed and it's going to be revegetated, it's going to be meadow grass plantings that are throughout there. That spec on the meadow grass is also noted on sheet 2 of the landscape plan. But it's a seed mix that's designed to be low growing, but also to be fairly adaptable, sun and shade, so that it can be planted underneath these panels, as well as around the panels themselves. And that goes back towards the stormwater management as well, with removing that material and then using a meadow grass, we're going to be shooting the stormwater in that way, of course, with the state guidelines.
Steve, where are you removing the pavement?
Sure. Sheet 1.
Actually, if you go to the other one you showed, there you go.
Yeah.
All right. So if you look at that, like there's the big, almost everything you see in that lower area is impervious material. The outlines of the actual cement pads are those 2 big squares.
The dark patch or no?
Yes. And then, and the color one that we say there's a mouse, is that? Am I allowed to do that?
Sure.
So the pads, this is one pad. And this is the other pad, but all of this is impervious concrete and or pavement. All of this is pavement. Pavement runs all over and on both sides. And this whole area, this square here, is considered impervious because it was a crushed gravel pavement processed parking lot. And so was this entire area on both sides of the roads. Kind of a dumping area now, and a lot of that gravel's been scraped. But I'm told by the engineers that the DEM still considers it impervious because it was a crushed gravel driveway. And that has to be now turned, some of the top couple inches that it wasn't scraped completely down, needs to be removed, loomed, and then metal. So it's putting it back to a point where it can be called impervious, which was important for us, because obviously when you have that much impervious, every neighbor has dealt with whatever water runoff existed over the years. There's a lot of drains and things that are done, but this should allow it to, I think the word sheet flow instead of river flow from the outlets that are currently connected in those areas. And then it may not be for you, but the drainage plan for the planning board in every direction is designed to meet the ordinance that we won't have. Even property, much of it came across the street. Even the removal of a lot of that gravel helps us already, but it will all be better for all of the water that's currently running off those paths, and now have our own land with some things. Design.
Do you have anything planned for the western side of that for controlling runoff other than it's going to be about the same as existing?
Western towards the water.
Yeah.
Well,
What happens to the runoff?
right now, it's 3 separate culverts and it's piped in 3 separate outlets that have created 3 separate streams down to coast, down to the coast. And by removing a lot of this, it will still go in that area with sheet flow. Because of the coastal feature and what they call a coastal wetland, a large bit of that western area is inside coastal jurisdiction and touched without their approval, both to make it drier, because they have a concern of that, and to make it. So the purpose of all land that's not being solar is to maintain as a farm all 40 acres. And approximately 15.5 will go to solar, but the balance of it is, if you're so interested, is we have the most fun across the street, and there's a number of trails that have fun with trespassing on, but that other people have put in, and people with golf carts and those things. And trails owns it, and keep those trails around the property and be able to go around the solar farm on the balance. There's also there's industrial land up in front that's not used, it could be separated and sold. It's a separate entity, but we have plans for that. This ties up. I think I've explained this to everybody before. When you have a piece of property of the size, you have a couple of choices to try to get it. And one is to sell off the development rights, like Nature Conservancy, and you can argue whether or not it's selling your children's future or whatever. One way to tie it up from development for 25 years is to sign these agreements. Then can be removed. Then it would actually makes it a decommission bond. The solar company calculate what it would cost 25 years from now to take it down, which is today's cost plus either 10 or 15%, post a bond with the town, so this can be returned. But the day after this is done, if it fails in a day or 25 years, I have a better piece of property than I had, because I have the landscaping around West Shore Road and all of the areas. I've removed a ton of impervious material. I've planted I've added loom to areas that have not seen loom or plantings in many years, and added meadow grass, which to me, if you look across the street, meadow grass is what I seek to achieve in many areas with the vegetation around the outside, not if you've seen the farm on the other side, I certainly don't think you're looking at it for clear cutting. It's just that between areas of woods, we have large, 3 or 4 large pastures for horses. Why we look like about. So I think we're all better off with water runoff, vegetation, plantings, with real plants instead of some wild stuff. But you underestimate how much wild junk olive and bittersweet like on a daily basis. But I think that's the goal.
The fencing that surrounds the property is raised, isn't it, to allow for wildlife passage?
Correct.
Yeah, all that by statute has to be raised, I think, 5 inches for wildlife passage underneath. And that's not been the case, although it's run down and quite frankly, all the animals finding their ways through. The entire Pearson property was fenced. It's certainly lost all its West Shore Road fencing. If you go down on the north side and even down on the water, those fences still exist. So, but these fences will be in accordance with the statute. I don't think, at one point we talked about, whether to put, I think the school talked about the color fences or those things. I think the company has proposed regular chain link fencing, but in all cases, the fencing is on the back side of the vegetated buffers, not the front side. Of the vegetated buffer. That made a difference with me, or whether I was joining with green fence or black fences or screening on it. You understand the blind screen will give me a little more recent, and I reserve my right to put that seat on that front when I see that. The purpose is that we look at vegetated stuff and not the fence. And with the berm, 3 feet of the fence, they're not. The fence starts on the other side, it's a security fence. Technically, the bottom 3 feet will be blocked by the berm. When we said 3 feet to 18 inches, that's not because we're not deciding whether 18 or 3. That's 3 feet in areas to match road, 18 inches to match, so that we have that. What starts off with the wall, just has to flow with the road.
The area of deteriorated pavement that's still remaining adjacent to West Shore Road, and a reason, was it significantly better shape than the one that you have to replace?
But the 2 gravel parking lots in my lifetime were just that, they were parking lots. And then, quite frankly, after about 2010, or 12, and Albany went out of business, and while it was owned by people who were developing this into a 23 lot condo subdivision. Sure, I did. It was 23 lots on 40 acres. It wasn't crazy, but it was still different from me as a neighbor. And I was involved in it, not as a principal, but as the attorney, because it was better than so many other things that was pitched. But they sold off or allowed some landscape companies to come in and take that land. So it wasn't stripped for any reason other than somebody sold it and somebody took it because it wasn't going to be needed. But when they did, they scraped it like someone was selling it, not like someone who was back in. So if there was a big rock there around that place. And then what happened is the fencing went down. Fencing went down approximately 2014. Some landscapers started dropping that, and then it became the dumping ground from hell. And if you go there now, there is, I believe, the contract to get rid of the cement, slabs, and junk that's in there exceeds 180. It's literally thousands and thousands of yards of dumped roots, tree stumps, everybody's crap on there. We try to regulate it. We don't have to want. So there's a massive cleanup being done And some of it, as you know, I don't know, there's already been substantial cleanup because the building came down. The building didn't come down higher to take the building down, put up condos. The building came down to some of the side of steel. And when they took the steel, what was left was the piles of insulation and the piles of wood between it, all smashed up and put there by excavators. And there were 27 tractor trailer trucks. So a lot of cleanup has already been done. Not hazardous, just jump. That's the building in its heyday, and you can see where the two gravel parking lots existed. They're all, I'm guessing 10-year growth now. 90% of it seems to be birch,
Yeah,
1 inch to 2 inch diameter. That apparently grows almost nothing. They can't require too much nutrition from what I said. That's it now, with that removed. And you see where those parking lots now have those large piles. That's all slabs of cement and there's building materials, all the wood, tar, roofing has been removed. Anything that belonged in a dumpster is gone. What's left is hopefully process.
What's the underground water service? Is that completely disconnected to the site?
It's completely disconnected, but we still pay for the water tie-in, and I left that on West Shore Road because I don't have to pay for the tie-in. But if I do, I have to reapply and have a new install. So we have kept a single water tie. The one of the problems with the building, so the historical thing was that water did not run any fire prevention system. The fire prevention system came from the pond across the street. It was dug for both the warehouse and the Alvin yachts. And there's giant pumps and pump houses that ran through an easement. You can actually see the pump house down on the pond if you scroll a little bit further right. It's down below my house. You see the pond right there where the pond comes in a little is the pump house. That 8-inch pipe ran all the way to what they call the pools. Very large pool, 16 feet deep, 100 feet long, and 35 to 40 feet wide, where they should float. Test floats. And there it is. Still exists and needs to be capped. We're actually looking into whether or not we can certify, because the walls are foot thick, whether we can certify it by the engineer as structurally sound so that we can reach in for a farm building. I should note there's a farm building that we propose on this as well, up on the hill. Right. See that area where there's no panels? That's where there's a hill, and that bank is going to be a little visible. So one of the ways to not only make neighbors not look at solar panels, but we had a board farm type building up there. And my contract with the solar people not to have it exceed 24 feet high shadows, but it would allow some warrant for some animals or tractors and things. People living up on hill, and also give us some nice beautiful film place probably have a beautiful water. Those crossing drops on. That's it. To say so far, it has been you, and it's been to the planning board a number of times. Solar has been pretty objectionable in town, but for the most part, this site seems to be where everybody says, hey, no, that's where it belongs. And that's happened so far. We are through a preliminary master approval. We go for preliminary approval on Wednesday night, and I know Frank is the hardest part is if you so kind to give us a recommendation we're looking for. Maybe something like special. That, you know, to be fair, unfortunately, what's happened on the agenda for a couple of times, and one of the times we had 60-mile-an-hour winds and some of it's coming from our fall. We didn't have a forum, we just had a little bit of bad luck scheduling, no time. The agenda wasn't posted properly. Be here at the planning board, so we've been at this for a while. Doesn't. There's never big problems with Alice getting to it. Don't worry about permits for now. Unless you have any other questions, that's our presentation.
Thank you for your time.
Next on our agenda is equipment club, proposal for equipment club development on the lane, 28 new houses.
Did you just change your hat?
He put on his glasses, I didn't recognize him. Oh, who's that?
Listen, that's why I don't have to remember, I have to actually use my notes.
But as you know, and I'm sure those have heard that, what we looked at the design review board, or, you know, let's look at architectural expression of the proposed building, the site plan, any lighting or signage, which I don't think are issues in this case, but I'd like to get started.
Yeah, I start with an overview, and this is the same neighborhood, right? This is, if you look at the overview, this is really right next door. This is what I originally called the Carnegie Club, it's now the Equipment Club. As I explained to the zoning board, I'll use those interchangeably, and I apologize. But it's come a long way. For those that have followed the Carnegie Club, it was also a little bit before design review, quite frankly. That came to us as a result. There was a number of pieces. In this particular piece, this is a 6.4 acre piece known as Lot 10. It's also its own phase over there at the condominium. And because I was a neighbor, I never jumped on board and reserved my right to fight it, because I wasn't quite sure that the Carnegie Club or Equipment Club was going to be all it was cracked up to be. But in fact, as a neighbor, most of us living in town don't really have a lot of objections. It has become, it's beautiful. It brings in nothing but, let's just say, people that I haven't seen the police department having to be active down there, the school system having to be active down there. There's a lot of very positive things to the town without really too much of the negative stuff, if any. And again, it's like, has a pretty large border with it. Really, the only traffic down that I see on West Shore Road is from something else I like. That's those little pedal cars on the train tracks. They're really sick. But this particular lot, which is 6.4 acres in bulk, at one point, it was kind of set up to be a public works lot for, and then that was moved over to where the building is, that houses all the golf equipment just off of Depot Street. Then at one point, it was the equestrian cottages, and there was a number of equestrian themed houses there. Then it was the marina service area, because it was contemplated that the Equipment Club Marina or Carnegie Marina would be larger than it ended up. By the time they got coastal with a smaller marina, Mr. O'Neill at the time in 2009, 2009, went back to the zoning board and said, I don't really need this as a marina service unit. And he proposed to turn this back into housing. When he proposed to turn it into housing, he got approved in 2009 for 3 buildings that were 576 feet long. It did not come to design, and 50 feet wide. They housed 36 3-bedroom, approximately 2,500 square foot units. That, there's a little bit of argument whether that lapses, because when you have a special use permit, it only lasts 1 year. We had what's called the tolling statute from 2009 to 2017. And even though They changed the condo docs and went and got the special use permit. Now they're coming back and saying, 36 units in 3 large buildings. We would rather take that density down to 28 units. Still dense, I get it, but it is in fact 8 units less than what was approved. And we would like to have individual houses instead of the big buildings. Now, the problem with that is pretty obvious. The 3 big buildings, although they are what they are, there's more space between buildings because there's no space between the 36 units. But Carnegie and Goodnick Club and Newport Beach Club, even though they all started out as this concept, they're interesting now because we actually get to see what we got. We get to see what they said they did. For those of you that are familiar with both the Carnegie Club and Newport Beach Club, there's 2 specific housing components in each of those that this mirrors. If you go to the Cottages at Carnegie, remember Carnegie has a tower, of course, that has 8 units. It has the 24 or so individual house lots around the tower. Those average almost an acre of land. Those houses are 4,000 to 5,000 square feet, stunningly beautiful with a different market. And then there's the cottages, which are the 2,500 square foot individual homes, only separated by 10 or 15 feet between them. They're kind of identical. They've been a very, very successful aspect or successful part of Carnegie. There's not a lot of turnover. They are exactly those types of units that everybody told they would be. There's some that are occupied full time, but the majority of those people coming in 5, 6 weeks a year, and what the balance needs when you have a resort. You really don't want 280 units in total with everybody there all the time. COVID added more than pre-COVID, there is no doubt, but it's still there's still just a handful of full-time residents at Carnegie compared to the people that come in. So this, with the cottages being completely sold out, the last 3 again being built as we speak, there was the opportunity to try to take these 36 units in these 3 buildings that have not been as marketable, the tower, for instance, we all know it's not been as marketable, and try to set that up. What I would point out here is that this is really just an internal neighborhood. It is all inside of Carnegie. Because of the topography of the land, you're not going to be looking at this from the water because you can't see it. You're not going to be looking at it really from West Shore Road. And when you look at it from Willow, there's Carnegie to the left and Carnegie to the right. And it really is it's kind of an internal neighborhood. We're going to have our architect come up and explain the concept and explain the drawings. So basically, there's a couple of different houses that all kind of look alike. Like all of these types of areas, you have some choices on whether or not you want bonus rooms or spas or things, but they all take up the footprint that you see. The 5 or 6 houses that are on the west side are built into a very steep bank and a very steep hill. And we call those hillside units. That's an interesting concept that we need to point out, and you may have an opinion on. As I know what some of you do, especially my builders and architects. If you have a building that is 1 floor, and then you have a roof on top of it with no knee walls or sidewalls, and have an 8 to 10 pitch roof on top of a 1 floor building, how many stories is that building? Traditionally in Portsmouth, we've called that a 1-story building, and we call it 1.5 if we have knee walls of 4 feet. A strict reading of our ordinance says a story is the living space between a floor and a roof, or a floor and floor. So there's 2 stories. Who cares and why? This is all on industrial property. It's not a residential neighborhood. All of Carnegie, for all purposes, all the land we just talked about, all of the Newport Beach Club belong to warehouse, Montauk Electric, Kaiser Aluminum, Pearson Yachts. It was the industrial district in town that's just not industrial anymore. Whether we traded it all for resort, whether it was a good idea, whether it was a bad idea, it's just not industrial. But industrial has its own set of not only setbacks, but building requirements. A setback for a house in an R20 zone is 20 feet front yard, 15-foot side, 20-foot rear. Industrial is 60-foot front, 50-foot rear, and 30-foot sides. So most of Carnegie obviously does not have 60-foot fronts, 50-foot things. They have granted individual variances for it. But also an industrial building, in an industrial zone, you can only have 2 stories. In an R10, with the Allen Park Conference Point, small neighborhood, yeah, you're allowed 2.5 stories and 35 feet. In an industrial land, you're only allowed 2. I guess they presume flat roofs. I really don't know what they're doing in 1964, I wasn't there, but that's what it says. So one of the variances is to put a standard house, and all of these houses are nearly, all of the typical houses are 1 floor and a roof, which is 2 stories. But the hillside units that are built into the hill are garage on the lower level, if you will, then 1 story, then a roof on top of that. We use, it's a story if we use average grade. So when you build into the side of the hill, if 50% of it is in the hill, that doesn't count as a story. But if 51% is outside of the hill, that would count as a story. That's to the extent that the hillside units, they're still less than 35 feet high, the average grade. So we don't be height requirements. But to the extent that unit, which is fairly typical on the downhill side of houses that we all see, to the extent that's 3 stories, we have to ask the zoning board for a variance for that. And that's about 6 units. Big units. So that's one of the variances. The other variances that we are looking at, we've maintained the industrial setbacks of 60 feet on West Shore Road. Part the sport lives on West Shore Road, maybe, but part because that is really the public road that services residential neighborhoods. So we've kept industrial setbacks. On Willow Lane, which was an industrial road, it's really the only abutter is your own property. We've maintained a 30-foot setback, which is consistent with our 30, our 40, and our 60 zones. So we're not asking for less than is allowed in every highest size residential zone, but it is in fact less than 60. I should probably tell you that our ordinance is unique. If you abut more than 1 road, you have 2 front yards. So the front yard is always 60 feet in the industrial zone. Because this piece is abutted by 2 roads and what we call the clamshell road, they will technically have a 60-foot on Willow, another 60-foot on West Shore, and another 60-foot on the clamshell road. Those of you that know, that's the road that connects the gate at Carnegie to the back gate at Newport Beach Club. We proposed a 30-foot setback on that road, but the road itself is 24 feet wide or so, and it abuts the railroad, which depending on where you are, is at least 20 feet and 40 feet in some areas. So there's actually a combination and some heavy vegetation between that road and the 2 houses that abut it to the east. One's named Sylvia, I'm not sure. We maintain the full distance on the west side to Ferris property. So really the setback variance is on Willow, which almost could be considered an internal type setback. It's fenced and heavily vegetated now.
So is the property line along the east side of the Seashell Drive, is that the property line?
The property line on the east side is the railroad tracks.
Oh.
So the clamshell road is on this piece of property
Okay.
now and operates with an easement. Remember, Brian O'Neill owned it all at one point. So because he was developing Newport Beach Club and was the owner of the Carnegie Club, he did things so that they weren't one entity. Lots of people don't know that, I guess, but the Newport Beach Club is not the Equipment Club. The Equipment Club is not Newport Beach Club. But because the 2 of them had the same owner and developer, there's a number of agreements between them, like that road. There are certain offers of reciprocity for you can join our club and you can join our club. Some of that's gone away with both of them, as you know, there's a lot of receivership or not bankruptcy foreclosure, and now purchase memberships without being a card carrying member of the real estate club, you used to have to, if you bought metallic, you had to buy a membership. If you bought one of these units, you had to buy a membership. These units are offered club amenities. They can buy in, and they have certain, at some point when the club fills, then you have to prioritize the on-property sites. So there's priority agreements when it fills, that they have a guarantee that it's one for two. If there's 2 spots open, 1 go to residents. And 1 go. And they have some marina slips that are dedicated to that. I believe there's 5 marina slips dedicated to these properties as well. The purpose, of course, is the Carnegie or Equipment Club certainly is thriving now for a great few years. And by getting a housing component and some more people in houses that are designed to be this resort style house, where you can go, have a little separation from your neighbors. We did not limit them to age 55 and over, kind of what they happen to be. You have 4 children or 3 children, would you buy in this section? There are no yards to speak of. You have some 10, 15 feet around your house in every direction. You almost need to use the member of the private club pool system, because there's no room in your yard without buying your neighbor's lot to put in a pool. So these are designed to be owners that would have no young children, would buy these to be members of our club, and to take use of the amenities and get the numbers up for everyone, and to promote this area continues to grow. It's really kind of in the middle of everything, and as I said when they asked me to do it, I don't think anybody sees it with you, and I like it better than 576-foot long buildings. So I think the integrity and architecture speaks for itself, but I'll bring Jeremy up to explain what he's doing. Clearly high end, these are not trailers. I don't know if Mr. Stalington wants to put a price tag on it, but I believe it starts with a 1 and not a.
It'll be less than 1.
But certainly not.
Not much less.
Hopefully it will be.
The cost of materials keep going up.
Is the expectation that these are gonna be like the cottages, that there are few full-time residents, but mostly it's summer people?
Mostly people that want to be able to have their own place while at the club and join the club. And again, I listened to Paul Logan say that people were going to be there 3 or 4 weeks, and I was there with kind of persons. A lot of that. Again, other than COVID and 4th of July, it's pretty much a ghost town. Although I think there's 3 or 4 families in all of the units in the Cottages club now.
Is it intended to be a gated community from off of Willow Lane and West Shore Road?
Well, the gates are on both sides right now. There's the gate, of course, that goes into Carnegie on the left, and there's the gate that leaves. So both sides of the clamshell, it's a private road because it is owned by us. So the general public is on it. We're utilizing the clamshell road for the entrance, but there are no gates proposed, and that's thought out and discussed. One of the greatest problems, get trouble with wrong people here, with the equipment club is the cost of being there on a monthly basis because of upkeep of such a facility. And if you do the math and you put a police officer or security guard on a gate 24/7, 365 days a year, even at minimum wage, you've got every single person in there. To jump in there right now, you can just add people and disperse the amount. You can't add separate gates and add to that. If it becomes a problem with security, so I don't want to say it on the record, but there's no gate on my house. shouldn't say, go down there, you could probably find keys in those cars. I mean, we live in Portsmouth, it's why we live in Portsmouth. The gates are an amenity that people like to be on the high end, but I'm not sure that security is such that they're needed. That's the plan right now, that if we can avoid that and keep fees down for this particular neighborhood, then it would be an easier selling point. And what Mr. Salmon is saying, that doesn't stop by one. We are trying to get these things to people that can join in, not, I mean, how many? We all like the club, but it would be nice if it was a little bit more accessible. And this may make that more accessible in later years. So,
Why is there no sidewalk adjacent to home one? To be able to get from Willow Lane in, and then the same thing for West Shore Road.
good question.
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and introduce myself. I'm Jeremy Lake with Union Studio Architecture and Community Design. I feel a little bit like I'm here for my first day with you guys. Before I had a chance to woo you with my wit and charm, Court gave you my waist size, my financial status, and a little bit of a medical history. But in any case, we do have a little presentation, and I could go through it quickly, and then I could answer your question, because we'll have one of the graphics here to kind of show you what we're trying to do. So as I mentioned, I'm with Union Studio. We are based in Providence. We are a local firm, but I didn't want to take for granted that meant you guys knew who we were. So just a very quick introduction, if you want to just tab through the slides. So this is our team. Keep going. Quick introduction. We'll talk through the proposed plan and obviously talk through things. So Union Studio, we were founded about 20 years ago with our overriding goal to use our skills as architects and urban designers to make a civic contribution to communities of all types. Go ahead. Our mission is to use the power of design to enrich lives and strengthen communities. Go ahead. Again, founded 20 years ago. We are based in Providence, but we do work throughout New England and actually throughout the country at this point. We have a couple projects in Oklahoma actively, Virginia, a number of other places. So we're growing and expanding, which is exciting. We have 25 employees. I think 15 of us are registered architects. So we have a fairly professional office, again, locally based, but with some reach here. Go next.
That's the Tiverton Public Library.
Tiverton Public Library, that's right. Yeah, so.
Building they own, but they have.
Yeah, so we do primarily housing of all sorts and forms, student housing, affordable housing, market rate housing. But we also do other types of projects. We do institutional, we do a lot of community design, a lot of neighborhood design, so commercial spaces, et cetera. So we consider ourselves generalists, although I think housing really is our strength across the board. Next. So again, quick overview of the proposed plan. We can go through this very quickly. Next one. I think you know where the site is. We've been talking about that. Currently, there's nothing on the site, largely undeveloped, largely clear, with the exception of some of the trees at some of the edges. Next. In terms of the topography, you can see it's sort of largely flat in the sort of lower portion of it. And you can see where the grades start to slope up as you're going back along the western edge. It's also worth noting along the southern edge there, you've got a good sort of 4 or 5 feet that you go up before you get onto the site. So we talk a little bit about that setback on that edge. That's important to understand. Along the Seashell Drive, there's a berm there, so those grades go up and back down again. So I think we would more or less level that out, so you would no longer have a berm on that edge, since that's how you approach and enter the community. Go to the next slide, please. So as I mentioned, there is a flat portion of the site which we knew would require a particular approach for those moments. And then the next slide. There's also then the sloped portion of the site, which is where Court mentioned we have what we're calling the hillside units that were very much intentionally. We needed them to basically absorb grade into the hillside to be able to fit into that portion of the site. Next. And so this is the proposed design for the site. The Seashell Drive there is along the eastern edge. It's effectively one large sort of loop, and then that little secondary smaller loop off of it. The homes were arranged so they front on those internal streets. And we've included a couple of communal green spaces as well. As Court mentioned, the idea here wasn't to try to put a lot of space between every unit, but enough space between every unit, and then consolidate some of the remaining space to create some of these common areas. So if you did want to take your dog for a walk or have your grandkids over and run around with it, then there is somewhere to do that without having to go all the way to the pool club or anything along those lines. We do include sidewalks, so to answer your question, the thought was to run them really around the inside of the largest block, but not necessarily on both sides of the street. That seemed a little extensive for a community of only 28 homes.
And we did want you to be able to get around that block and connect over to each of the green spaces. But we debated whether or not there was any use in then extending them all the way out to Willow Lane or all the way out to West Shore Road, since there aren't sidewalks on those streets. So the real thought was really that those sidewalks let the residents really connect amongst themselves or have an ability to walk around without necessarily having to walk on their own streets. I certainly would entertain the notion of extending those out to Willow Lane and West Shore Road if you thought that that was important. But again, we were just trying to be mindful of impervious area and all those sorts of things. And so trying to create a logical loop, but without necessarily taking it all the way out. I'll just finish up the last couple slides we had on the point. So we included a rendering really just to give you a sense of the scale of those green spaces. So you can see the one there in the foreground, and then the larger loop road connects back to the hillside units where we have another little sort of crescent shaped space in the back there. Next slide. In terms of the homes themselves, we have two typical types. This one is the one that's on the flatter portion of the site. We have 20 of those units. Story and a half is how we would describe it, as Court said, depending on how you want to describe it. The more legal aspect, it would be a two-story home. We certainly think of it architecturally in terms of its character as a story and a half. Ground floor living dining kitchen with a primary bed suite behind the two-car garage there. So you do have a front porch out on the front. You have a rear porch on the back that would also connect to a rear patio and yard area. And then upstairs, we have two secondary bedrooms. We really think of these as sort of the grandchildren's bedrooms. And we did have a big space in the attic above the garage. So we're proposing the potential for a bonus room there that might be sold as unfurnished, could be a great storage attic space, or there could be the option of someone finishing that out if they wanted a rec room, for instance, upstairs. This is roughly 2,100 square feet without that bonus room, just over 2,500 square feet with the bonus room. Next slide. And then back up along the hillside, again, because of the topography there, the idea was that the ground floor is exposed on the front, but tucks into the hill in the back, so that by the time you're on the back side of the house, that's really completely below grade or largely below grade. So that lowest level is primarily for the garages and a bonus room in the back. We may try to sneak a window with a window well back there if we're able, depending on how the grades work out. But otherwise, we're largely thinking of that, again, as primarily an unfinished storage space, although someone could choose to have it finished and make it a rec room, TV room. Main living dining kitchen on the what we'll call the first floor above the ground floor. We do have a small bedroom suite on that level that I think will more likely be a candidate for like a home office really than being the sort of primary bedroom. And then on the upper level, we have two bedrooms, including a primary suite, and have included the option for a residential elevator because this is getting to be a, call it a 3-story unit because of the demographic that we imagine will be the buyer here. We've often found offering the option of an elevator, which they could put in up front or down the road, is a useful thing to offer for the folks that we intend to be here. So we have 2 of those at the ends that are standalone single family like this. And if you go to the next slide, we have 3 duplexes in the middle where it's effectively the same unit, just mirrored and attached as a duplex. Next slide. One thing I will say is when we did these renderings, I think we did ourselves a disservice by showing them with the same materials, the same colors. I think we would intend to actually get some variety in the community. So introduce different colors, different materials, not just clapper, not just shake, but a mixture of those things. This is the list of materials we have agreed to utilize to be in keeping with the sort of Carnegie Abbey. So I think what's of note here is there's no vinyl siding, no vinyl windows, no vinyl fencing, right? It's all going to be wood or cementitious materials, wood windows. So really high quality materials are going to be utilized here is what we just wanted to share. And I think that's it for what we want to kind of quickly talk through. We just included the conceptual, the initial engineering that's been done in case there are any questions there. So now, sorry, thank you for letting me get through that, but happy to answer any questions you guys might have, and hopefully now we'll have visuals to be able to follow us as well as.
And we do have Molly from Complete Engineering in case you have any questions, but because of the age of Carnegie and the lack of design way back then, remember that all of our building code is not on individual ISDS. It's on a sewage treatment plant system. All calculated at the time, calculated at the time for the number of eventual bedrooms. And there was always a housing component, whether this was the equestrian center, that has been moved a couple of times depending on the marina, but we are still within the density of the capacity of that system. And because that system is based on bedrooms, we keep getting discounts for the difference between days I stayed there. The full field is not only adequate, but a full backup field that was put in, and part of, and this all ties into that. We'll have to show the planning board like we did for the 36 units, that obviously they put 36 units as to septic capacity, part of that's 28 units, that's the septic capacity.
Where's the septic?
The septic is, are you familiar with Elliott? Can you scan out back to any of the big photographs? If anybody has a boat, what they call it is the backup parking for trailers. So if you leave the marina and you're coming up the hill, you take a left on the only road called Elliott. It passes on the right-hand side, the Ferris property, which are the houses on top of the hillside units. And then there's approximately a 12 to 15 acre field there. Right there, that's the star right down from where you just were, Mike, was, that's the leach field and the backup leach field. And the building up there is the treatment plant, or the physical building itself. Which in main part abuts that solar farm. And all those locations there at that point. There.
On my sheet 9 of the handout, just out of curiosity, on the west side of the high berm, there's a very narrow property line that runs up to Elliott Street.
The west side,
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to guess it's probably a 10-foot wide, maybe, or so. It looks like just a walkway or something, that's part of the property
no,
line.
that's that's water lines and the septic easement, because that building is going back towards the plant itself.
So we would not include a walk or anything back through there, it's just a utility.
It's just a
Utility,
utility.
very utility, okay.
Topography is such that,
Yeah.
you need some gear to get there.
Is there public parking down by the marina?
In my opinion, there is, because when you go down the marina, there is a private parking lot that's all the way down to the left. There's always, since we've been there, marked as a private. Halfway up that parking lot, it's always been marked public parking, and that's where there's a lot of railroad ties that are about 20, 30 feet long, and for trailer parking.
In that parking lot?
Parking of both trailers, yes. And then the spillover parking is up to Elliott and there. I can move right there and use that boat ramp. So you launch the boat, you park at the public lot, which oftentimes is full pretty early, because it doesn't go that much. And if not, go up to Elliott, park in that huge area, because they allow you to utilize the grass. Apparently you can drive on it. There's a lot of gravel there, we got grass as well. And then you walk right down across that grass field, and there's a path between and you can also get a golf cart ride. You know,
If you ask nicely.
you know, the opposite of it, where it's down at the club.
We didn't talk about lighting, I'm just kind of wondering, are there like street lights or any lights on like, or sign for anything, or?
For the units themselves, there's certainly many lights on the porches. I don't remember, did we end up doing any kind of street lighting, or we didn't?
We
do any?
did submit to the planning board specs showing that individual lights have not been picked out, but they're standard residential, sky compliant lights.
There's, yeah, there's.
My understanding was that there were no street lights proposed, and they were talking about whether or not a couple of small 8 to 10 foot tall, like a gas light looking in the common areas, just so if somebody was walking a dog at night, it wasn't dark.
Mhm.
Yeah, from West Shore Road, there's a thick line, that heavy line of trees is all very mature. They are 8 to 14 inches in diameter. Maples I know. It's pretty thick in there as well as Ellie. On Willow's already lit, right, as you know. Clamshell Road is certainly not lit. But I believe there's any-
So Willow has.
no plans.
streetlights?
Willow has street lights.
There's no proposal for, excuse me, sort of signage with the club.
The whole. Put a sign in a swimming club, and it really should be up on Bristol Ferry or up on the top on West Shore, and they've survived without that so far. You know, Newport Beach Club has a beach club sign out front, but they have road front. Because nowhere on a swimming club do they really have road front, there's not even a sign to the main gate for that, so, those signs would be proposed for that.
I think it's one thing we benefit from that existing gatehouse. It probably won't be used as a gatehouse. It does provide a nice little sort of entry landmark feature. So that if you're describing how to get to your house, come down Willow Lane, you see the little, red gatehouse, take a right, and we're just inside of there. So it's nice that we can actually take advantage of that almost as a entry feature without having to add additional tax on.
So no actual signage, just the gatehouse would be there.
The Clamshell Road is not named now.
Yeah.
But I think they're gonna
Or we could
propose
do
it, it's like seashell, I read on the plan with the name, so there may be a street sign.
Yeah, okay.
But certainly no sign.
Question two, just about the windows, I'm looking at the architectural, color renderings of it, looks like you have your 2/2. Are those authentic divided light windows, or are they solid glass with interior grills?
I imagine they will be interior grills, simulated divided lights and interior divides.
And you know,
We haven't gotten to that level of specificity, but certainly the intention would have it look as though it's divided light with on the exterior, on the interior.
One thing that came up on your renderings versus the open space that the galley system is, it shows some trees there, but you're building some trees within the galley area. Has the galley area been engineered yet?
What do you mean by the galley area? I'm not sure I know
That's a
what
galley system for the detention,
Yeah.
for the stormwater detention area that is underground. Is that design, Molly, and would it be in
It's
conflict
roughly
with the trees that we?
Yeah. It's all subsurface, so.
Yeah, our hope would be to put trees at the periphery, knowing that there'd be something in the middle. So
So
I think
the roots don't bother it, that kind of system,
No, what I'm saying is we can reshape it depending on where we actually have the development and everything. That's what we're on.
trees are good. I like that you're actually putting in some larger shade trees, the more the merrier. The ornamental trees, like pear, like, they don't last long. I live on, off of Mill Road, it's like the whole neighborhood's, all the trees are falling down, so. 'cause it's all pear trees.
Court. Do you want to have John talk about the landscape?
yeah, and certainly our goal is to do what street trees, right? People don't often do street trees anymore,
Yeah.
true street tree. So that's what we were kind of going after. I think we would keep working with John to make sure we get that effect.
And I brought a landscape architect, so if I made a miss the picture scheme, I pretty much need to swear and at least let him talk.
John Carter.
And just introduce yourself quickly and see.
I will do that.
Landscape plan.
My name is John Carter. I'm a registered landscape architect. 960 Boston Neck Road, Narragansett. Do you mind, I hate to make you go backwards with you. Do you mind putting that aerial back up real quick? Thank you. I just want to take a quick walk through the existing site conditions. They've kind of been touched on a little bit, but I think it's kind of important to know what we're starting with. So as Jeremy pointed out, the site's been cleared, it's been graded. There's a berm along Seashell Road, there's a berm along Willow Road.
It was cleared by the way. vegetable and leave it out. Never restored.
So there's no significant vegetation there right now. So obviously, the first thing we do usually when we get involved in a project is to do a sort of site analysis inventory to see if there is anything significant. There is no significant vegetation. In the upper, in the sort of north corner there, there's a bunch of Helianthus tree of heaven, which is an invasive tree, some black walnuts and some maples. So there's really nothing significant there. Along the, just again, on the existing conditions, along the south side, there's just kind of a hedgerow of some scrub brush that's sort of come in on its own. On the south side of that, along the abutting property, the tower, is a fence with a hedge along the fence, and it runs all the way up, or let's say to the west, down towards the water. One of the interesting things, because I looked at it from the car, and I said, well, typically we see a privet or arborvitae or something like that, a single kind of different. So it's actually a Rose of Sharon, which is, if you're familiar with it, it's not typically a hedge plant, it's working really nicely there. And then on the east side, it's been pointed out, there's the Seashell Road, and then there's a hedgerow that's pretty significant. Then there's the railroad tracks, and then there's some vegetation. In the proposal, that wouldn't be touched. So what's there now would continue to act as a buffer. And then on the west side, Jeremy pointed out the grade change. So it's about 10 feet. The site is about 10 feet below that house that's up above there. So at this point, you can't really see anything, either up or down. I would anticipate that will carry forward as the development goes on. In terms of how we're going to treat the landscape, what we'd like to do along Willow Lane is basically mirror the fence and hedge that's on the other side. Because of the density, because of the proximity to the road, the houses on that side of the road back up to the road, so the outside spaces will be on the road. We'd like to put a pretty significant screen. Then you would not see it from the road, and again, the people using the space would have some privacy too. The Seashell Road, as I said, everything would stay the same. The north will be a little bit of clearing, but it is pretty much just invasive deciduous vegetation. But the clearing of the vegetation would be to kind of nestle those houses into the slope, as you've heard. And then the interior of the site, and if you don't mind flipping back to my plan, that'd be helpful, thank you. The interior of the site will basically respond to the architecture. So what we're seeing happen is along the street frontages of each individual home, there'll be a small lawn area. There's a covered porch on the front of the building. And so there'll be some decorative planting and some trees. And I agree with your comment that I do lean towards trees that have a future, that may be there when we're not there, so that other people can enjoy them. A lot of the ornamental street trees have been used. The pears, for instance, and so forth, are short-lived, and even my lifetime, probably oldest one here, so Jeff. And I'm seeing some of these things starting to go. And so I think that it would be great to do something with something that could get larger, actually provide shade, and sort of have a future. In terms of the backs of the homes, we're going to treat them more like an outdoor courtyard than a lawn. So we're anticipating having privacy fences, and as Jeremy pointed out, they would be a high-end material, whether it's either cedar or some type of textured material. It's not been decided. Obviously, this is a pretty high-level look at this thing. There'll be some paver patios that people can use either with furniture or grills or gas fire pits, that type of thing. And then in terms of lighting, it's already been discussed, but we're just we're anticipating just residential lighting in this area, so decorative lighting, people individually.
Well, the fence, you think you like,
The height,
yeah,
I kind of like fences I can see over when I'm standing, like 5 feet.
Yeah.
So it's more for when you're sitting and so forth. But again, that's, I don't have it, that's gonna have a lot of people weighing in, Jeremy, weighing in on that, for sure.
and it's not like there's really any room for like a hot tub that's not gonna be covered or anything,
There'll be that porch you can see in the back of the building. So I was thinking if you do have a hot tub or something like that, you could put it on the porch.
Yeah.
But no, I don't, people could do whatever they want, with it, it's their property, but I'm anticipating, there's some really nice like solo stoves and portable gas fire pits and things that are really popular. People like them, they kind of activate the space. People with all the solar and LED lighting, there's a lot of nice decorative lighting you can do. And I was recently walking in a neighborhood, actually in Cambridge, but I was looking down into something very similar to this, old, very old. And everybody had all these little courtyards fenced off and they had lighting and seating, and gas fire pits and that thing. So it really looked nice and made me think this would work well too. That's about it on my end, unless you have questions.
And thinking about the ability to put the trees in the area with the galleries and the perimeter,
So
that we compromise on.
we would coordinate with the engineer. I think it's very possible. It's not a septic system, which has sort of restrictive 15 feet perimeters and all that. I think the tree selection is important. I also think that it's going to be an infiltration area for just runoff or roof runoff. So having trees that take the water up is a plus on multiple levels. So I think it's doable for sure. Species selection will be important.
So the size that was on the plans was calculated for roof and impervious pavement.
All this.
So when we go to the planning board and the zoning board. And we go to both, because remember that the fitness club in Carnegie was approved as a special use permit for a resort, before there was a resort ordinance. So the zoning board holds the original permit, which is the tower, the golf course, the marina, and everything Carnegie. The PUD that went in 2006, even though in 2009, that planned urban development resort area was in place, but because this was pre-existing as a special use permit, we need to go there. When we were at the zoning board the other day, the zoning board always has the right to refer us not only to design review, but to the planning board. And we have been referred to the planning board, and I think we're gonna show that under the PUD for resort, we also would be all right. But the PUD for resort says, which really to me suggests that the zoning board might have been a little short of time, was that if you have a 300 or 400 acre piece and you're gonna make a resort out of it, we shouldn't pull the little Compton trick of making 2 acre zoning and just cutting into 2 acre spots. Instead, we should combine a number of different housing areas, including single family housing, townhouses and condos, and some multifamily units. And that's what you got. You've got multifamily units at the tower. You've got condos around the cottages, only like 16 units or so, and now these hopefully, and you have the individual housing. And by doing that and concentrating in those areas and not using open space, the balance can be used for open space. It's a little bit of a cart before the horse argument in this, because the open space is 356 acre golf course. That's the average and all of that. When you look at the total, and we had to do this for the planning board and zoning board, but the new resort ordinance says we can have 2 units per acre on the average. This Carnegie, even if all this is granted and other buildings approved that would have to go back to the boards, it's still less than 1 unit per 2 acres when, because of the size, the sheer size of the golf course and the lots. Carnegie Heights, for instance, averages almost an acre, a third, I think, per lot. Around the tower, they're all 36,000 square feet at the smallest, and 54 to 60 at the largest. So there's a lot of large areas too, but the combination under our new PUD is supposed to be that we look at developable land area and we average 2 per 1 acre, not 1 per 2 acre. So we're still half that. There is no necessarily room more if we're going to develop a golf course, obviously, because there's 99 at least that on the golf course. It's not actually owned by the clear, but it's considered on the resort as part of. So ultimately, I think we will be able to convince the planning board that we would fit under the new ordinance. I think we should, any new job of hopefully can't convince the zoning board that lower, or get 36 units in the same spot with 576-foot building. I think you ought to be able to do it, ask for less. Usually when we ask for less, we do better. Carnegie is also, or the Equipment Club and Newport Beach Club, are also designed for more buildings than they're turning out to be. You have, especially at the Beach Club and at the Cottages, you have people that buy an empty lot next door and 2 neighbors split it because they want to live in a yard or something. That's happening on a hill at the Beach Club. You've got houses that are spanning 3 lots now. That takes the density down. You know, I don't know if it takes the density down from there looking up and saying a building 3 times the size of 3 individual buildings, but it takes the density as it relates to how many people are on the property and how many, which is traffic and septic and housing. So ultimately, it's all going less dense than what it was approved. Not substantially, but there's been, I think we pointed out 4 different units in Carnegie to put it this by a 1-person tower, knock the wall down, and combine 2 units, and 2 cottage units, and 1 or 2 of large ones around the tower or double. So it is coming down from, again, and it's nice that you have a septic that's designed for X big, and you're saying it's only wide at me. So ultimately, it's not just the market and about money, but it's about sustainability, what kind of units people want, so that we can put bodies in the seats, so that it all can be sustainable. Because those of us that live next door and see the Beach Club in receivership, you worry about what it will be. It's not supposed to be a single family neighborhood. It's supposed to be a resort. There's a big difference between a resort next door to your property and single family neighborhood. Both aren't bad, but the resort that has no one there for 4 months out of the winter is something I kind of enjoy as a neighbor. And that's what the sales pitch was. And that's what I think of, a lot of us that were given that was from Untitled to see and think here. This is certainly akin to continuing the resort concept.
You're the owner.
I'm Jeff Salatin,
Jeff.
and this is Chris Crecelius, and our company is Salatin Real Estate Group, and the Equipment Club, and we began planning together, and our role is to assemble this development team and to coordinate the planning, the design, the engineering, of course, and the construction, and ultimately the marketing. And our sense is that these homes will be smaller in nature. They'll be extremely useful to people that are empty nesters or folks that are sharing their time, maybe in the South or and coming up here, who want to enjoy not only the beauty of New England and Portsmouth, but may want to golf and may want to do some boating. We anticipate that people, for instance, my age, who might be downsizing, might have a place in Florida in the wintertime, would really enjoy coming into a high quality but smaller unit where they can live in a beautiful community and in a beautiful resort feel area. So that's one of the reasons that besides hiring Dupree Engineering to help us with civil engineering design, we brought Jeremy's firm in to make sure that the sense and the quality and the feel of the plan would meet something that we could be very proud of, rather than just looking at it from a civil perspective. We wanted to look at it from a community perspective. And we wanted to be sure that the products that are being used on the exterior were consistent with, even though they're smaller units, with the environment that we'll be sharing with the other neighbors. And then using, really sort of a relaxed, comfortable feel inside, that there'll be sort of light in nature and internally, and somebody can really enjoy it without having the burden of a lot of maintenance, both in the exterior of their units and inside their home. So we're very excited about this type of product, and we think that it'll be something that will be well received, and I think will be a good community alternative for housing. And I'd be glad to answer any other questions at any time. I'll give you one of our cards before we leave, in case you want to reach out to any one of us.
When is this going?
What's that?
When?
Is this going Wednesday as well?
No,
Okay.
this is on a regular track to be on Wednesday, January 12th, or whatever the first, second Wednesday is for the planning board. And then it would go back to the zoning board. It's currently scheduled for January the 20th. But and the planning board is going to go in pretty good depth about stormwater runoff, road layout. So that may be more than one. January or February is our goal. But no pressure on that.
Well, if nobody has any additional something, sir? All right, so no voters or concerned citizens? No.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
You don't mind if you do a card.